In February of 2024, Tulsa police say Keiosha Rucker failed to yield in front of a Tulsa fire truck near 41st and Harvard. Police say they had sirens on, headed to an apartment fire. 6 people were in the car. A 1, 4, and 5-year-old died, as well as a young woman.
In 3 seconds, a mother's choices killed 5 people, including her own 2 babies. February 26, 2024, 6:30 in the evening. A Tulsa intersection. Sirens screaming through the air. Metal twisting. Glass shattering. 5 lives gone in an instant. Keiosha Rucker was behind the wheel. Her 1-year-old daughter, Isaiah, was in the back seat. So was her 4-year-old daughter, Makia, her 5-year-old niece, Keelani, a 23-year-old woman named Tamia Ray, and a pregnant woman carrying her unborn child. 6 people in one car. Only 2 would survive. The fire truck was racing to save lives. Lights flashing, siren blaring. Other drivers pulled over. But Keiosha didn't stop. She turned left, straight into the path of a 30,000-pound fire engine traveling at over 60 miles per hour. The collision was catastrophic. But here's the question that's torn a community apart. Was Keiosha Rucker the only one to blame? Or was there something else happening that night that no one wants to talk about? Welcome to our channel. Right now, there are thousands of people getting behind the wheel while impaired, with children in their cars, completely unaware that one wrong decision could end multiple lives in seconds. If you want to help spread awareness about the deadly consequences of impaired driving and the warning signs that could save innocent lives, then please, like this video, share it, and subscribe to this channel. Your action now could help protect another child who might be in danger. To understand what happened that night, we need to understand who Keiosha Rucker was before the crash. Keiosha was a young mother in her early 30s from Tulsa, Oklahoma. She was the mother of 2 daughters, 4-year-old Makia Chapman and 1-year-old Isaiah Jones. Both girls were her world, according to people who knew her. Public records and news coverage provide limited details about Keiosha's early life. There's not much information available about her childhood, her education, or her career. What we do know is that she appears to have been a single mother and the primary caregiver for her 2 young daughters. Being a single parent is hard. Raising 2 children under the age of 5 alone comes with pressures that most people can't fully understand. Financial stress, emotional exhaustion, the constant weight of being responsible for 2 tiny lives with no one to share the load. But beneath the surface, Keiosha was struggling with something far more serious than just the everyday challenges of parenthood. She had developed a substance abuse problem.
Prosecutors say Keiosha Rucker was behind the wheel and under the influence of cocaine and marijuana when she pulled out in front of a fire truck that had its lights and sirens running.
Keiosha was using both cocaine and marijuana. This wasn't casual use. These were substances that would later play a central role in the events of February 26th. There was another problem too. Keiosha was driving without a valid license. She had no legal authority to be behind the wheel. This detail would become critical when investigators began piecing together what happened. Despite these struggles, Keiosha had no prior criminal record. There were no public incidents, no arrests, no history of violence or reckless behavior that anyone knew about. To the outside world, she was just another young mother trying to get by in Tulsa. Family and friends would later describe moments of joy. They talked about a woman who loved her children, a woman who wanted to provide for them, a woman who, in her best moments, was caring and devoted. But there was another side to Keiosha, a side that was battling addiction, a side that was making dangerous choices, a side that was putting her own children at risk every time she got behind the wheel while impaired. This is the duality that makes this case so difficult to process. How do you reconcile the image of a loving mother with the reality of someone who would drive under the influence with her babies in the car? How does someone who loves their children put them in such danger? It's a question that doesn't have an easy answer. Addiction is powerful. It changes the way people think. It makes them prioritize the substance over everything else, even their own children. But that doesn't erase the responsibility. It doesn't change the fact that Keiosha made a choice to get behind the wheel that night. She chose to drive without a license. She chose to drive while impaired. She chose to put 6 people, including 3 small children, in a car with her. And those choices would have consequences that no one could have imagined. February 26, 2024, around 6:30 in the evening, 41st Street between Harvard and Yale in Tulsa, Oklahoma. A fire had broken out at a building in Midtown Tulsa. Tulsa Fire Department Engine 19 was dispatched to the scene. The fire truck raced through the streets with its lights flashing and sirens blaring. This was a routine emergency response. Firefighters were rushing to save lives. At that same moment, Keiosha Rucker was driving westbound on 41st Street in her white Hyundai Accent. But she wasn't alone. Inside that car were 6 people total. 3 children. 1-year-old Isaiah Jones, 4-year-old Makia Chapman. Both were Keiosha's daughters. The 3rd child was 5-year-old Kilani Jones, Keiosha's niece. 3 adults. Keiosha herself behind the wheel. 23-year-old Tamia Ray, and a 26-year-old woman who was pregnant in her 2nd trimester, carrying what would have been her 1st child. 6 people packed into one car, heading down 41st Street on what seemed like an ordinary evening. Behind them, Engine 19 was approaching fast, lights flashing, sirens screaming. The sound was impossible to miss. According to witness testimony that would later be presented in court, traffic in both directions began pulling over to the right. Drivers were doing exactly what Oklahoma law requires. They were yielding to the emergency vehicle, giving the fire truck room to pass, letting the firefighters get to the fire as quickly as possible. But Keiosha Rucker did not pull over. The fire truck driver saw that Keiosha's vehicle was not moving out of the way, so he made a decision. He steered the massive fire engine into the open oncoming lanes to pass her on the left. This is standard procedure when a vehicle fails to yield. But then Keiosha made a left turn. She turned directly into the path of the fire truck. The fire truck was traveling between 61 and 67 miles per hour. A crash report would later confirm this speed. The driver had no time to stop, no time to swerve, no time to do anything.
Oh my God!
The 30,000-pound fire engine slammed into Keiosha's Hyundai Accent with devastating force. The impact was catastrophic. Metal twisted. Glass exploded. The car that had held 6 living people was destroyed in seconds. Emergency responders, who had been racing to save lives at a building fire, suddenly found themselves at a different scene. A scene far more horrific than they could have expected. First responders worked frantically to pull the victims from the wreckage, but for 5 of the 6 passengers, it was already too late. 23-year-old Tamia Ray was pronounced dead at the scene. 5-year-old Kilani Jones, gone. 4-year-old Makia Chapman, Keiosha's daughter, gone. 1-year-old Isaiah Jones, Keiosha's youngest child, gone. And the unborn baby carried by the 26-year-old passenger, also lost. 5 lives. Ended in 3 seconds at a Tulsa intersection. Only 2 people survived. Keiosha Rucker and 1 other adult passenger. But Keiosha was critically injured. The impact had left her partially paralyzed. She could not move her right arm or her right leg. The damage was permanent. She would carry the physical scars of that night for the rest of her life. As paramedics loaded Keiosha into an ambulance, the full weight of what had just happened was beginning to sink in. 2 of her own children were dead. Her niece was dead. Her friend was dead. An unborn baby was dead. And the investigation that was about to begin would reveal something that would shock the entire community. Within hours of the crash, the Tulsa Police Department launched a full investigation. This wasn't being treated as a simple traffic accident. 5 people were dead. 3 of them were children. 1 was an unborn baby. The police needed answers. Accident reconstruction specialists arrived at the scene. These are experts trained to analyze crashes and determine exactly what happened. They measured skid marks on the pavement. They documented the positions of both vehicles. They took photographs from every angle. They interviewed witnesses who had seen the collision happen. And then the critical evidence began to emerge. Blood tests were conducted on Keiosha Rucker at the hospital. The results were damning. The tests revealed the presence of both cocaine and THC, the active ingredient in marijuana, in her system at the time of the crash. Keiosha had been driving under the influence of drugs, with 6 people in her vehicle, including 3 small children. Investigators also discovered that Keiosha was driving without a valid license. She had no legal right to be behind the wheel in the first place. And there was one more critical finding. Keiosha had failed to yield to an emergency vehicle. Under Oklahoma law, all drivers are required to pull over and stop, or at minimum clear the intersection, when an emergency vehicle with lights and sirens activated is approaching. Witness testimony backed this up. During the investigation, prosecutors interviewed the fire truck driver. They also spoke with another motorist who had been on 41st Street that evening and witnessed the crash. Both witnesses testified that traffic in both directions had pulled over to yield to the fire truck. Everyone except Keiosha. The fire truck had its lights flashing. Its siren was blaring. This was standard emergency protocol. The firefighters were responding to a building fire. They were doing everything by the book. But Keiosha did not move out of the way. The most damning detail came next. As the fire truck attempted to pass Keiosha's vehicle by moving into the open oncoming lanes, Keiosha made a left turn. She turned directly into the fire truck's path. There was no time for the fire truck driver to stop. The collision was unavoidable. Prosecutors with the Tulsa County District Attorney's Office reviewed all the evidence, and they moved swiftly. Keiosha Rucker was charged with 5 counts of first-degree manslaughter.
Rucker faces 5 counts of manslaughter and driving under the influence of drugs.
1 count for each victim. Tamia Ray, Keilani Jones, Makia Chapman, Isaiah Jones, and the unborn baby. She was also charged with driving under the influence and failure to yield to an emergency vehicle. Each count of first-degree manslaughter in Oklahoma carries a possible sentence ranging from a minimum of 4 years to a maximum of life in prison. The district attorney made the position clear. This was not just a tragic accident. This was criminal negligence. Keiosha Rucker had made a series of choices that directly led to the deaths of 5 people. She chose to use cocaine and marijuana. She chose to drive without a license. She chose to get behind the wheel with 6 people in her car. And she chose not to yield to an emergency vehicle that was trying to save lives. The consequences of those choices were about to catch up with her. Before we continue, I want to ask you something. Have you ever witnessed someone driving impaired with children in the car? What did you do? Share your story in the comments. Your experience might help someone else recognize the warning signs. It might even save a life. And if this case is making you think differently about impaired driving, hit that like button right now. It helps us reach more people who need to hear these stories, people who might be making the same dangerous choices that Keiosha made. Because what happened next in this case is going to shock you. The evidence was about to get even more disturbing. After Keiosha was charged, she was held in jail while awaiting trial. She was recovering from her injuries. She was partially paralyzed, and she had just lost both of her children. You would think that someone in that position would be devastated, remorseful, broken by the weight of what had happened. But while Keiosha was in jail, she made phone calls to people on the outside. Here's something most people don't know. All phone calls made from jail are recorded and monitored. Inmates are warned about this repeatedly. They know that anything they say can be used against them in court. Keiosha knew this too, but that didn't stop her from saying something that would destroy any sympathy the public might have had for her. Prosecutors reviewed the recorded jail calls, and what they heard was shocking. In one conversation, Keiosha stated that the first thing she wanted to do when she was released was smoke marijuana. Let that sink in for a moment. Keiosha had just killed 5 people while driving under the influence of cocaine and marijuana. 2 of those people were her own children, her 1-year-old baby, her 4-year-old daughter, both dead because she chose to drive while impaired. And now, sitting in jail, facing 5 counts of manslaughter, she was already planning to use drugs again the moment she got out. There was no remorse in that statement, no accountability, no understanding of the magnitude of what she had done. She wasn't talking about how she wished she could take it back. She wasn't talking about how she would never touch drugs again. She wasn't talking about the children she had lost or the lives she had destroyed. She was talking about getting high. Prosecutors played these recordings in court. The impact was devastating. Any sympathy that might have existed for Keiosha evaporated in that moment. People had felt sorry for her. She had lost her own children. She was paralyzed. She would live with the physical and emotional scars of that night forever. But this wasn't a woman who had made a terrible mistake and was now living with the consequences. This wasn't someone who was broken by grief and regret. This was someone who, even after everything that had happened, still prioritized drugs over everything else. Public perception shifted dramatically. Social media exploded with outrage. People who had been willing to give Keiosha the benefit of the doubt now saw her for what she really was. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a pattern of behavior, a fundamental disregard for the safety of others, including her own children, and it was about to cost her everything. When Keiosha Rucker was first charged, she pleaded not guilty to all counts. Her defense attorney argued that this was a complex case. Yes, Keiosha had been impaired. Yes, she was driving without a license. But the defense claimed that the fire truck had been traveling at excessive speeds, between 61 and 67 miles per hour. The defense argued that Keiosha believed she had enough time to complete her left turn, that she thought she could get out of the way before the fire truck reached the intersection, that the speed of the fire truck made it impossible for her to judge the distance correctly. But as the months went by and the evidence continued to pile up, something changed. In October of 2024, 8 months after the crash, Keiosha Rucker changed her plea. She went from not guilty to no contest. A no contest plea is legally equivalent to a guilty plea when it comes to sentencing. But it's not a formal admission of guilt. The defendant is simply saying they will not contest the charges against them. This type of plea is often used when defendants are facing overwhelming evidence and know they can't win at trial. It's also a strategic move when there are pending civil cases, because a no contest plea can't be used as easily as a guilty plea in a lawsuit. And Keiosha did have reasons to be careful about admitting guilt. But we'll get to that in a moment. Even after changing her plea, Keiosha's defense team continued to argue that there were factors that should reduce her sentence. They pointed to the fire truck's speed, claiming it was excessive and unsafe. They emphasized that Keiosha was now partially paralyzed and would suffer for the rest of her life. They reminded the court that she had lost her own children and was living with grief that most people could never understand. But the judge was not moved. On January 9, 2026, nearly 2 years after the crash, Keiosha Rucker stood before Judge William Kello for sentencing. The courtroom was packed. Families of the victims filled the seats. Many of them were wearing shirts with photos of their lost loved ones. Tamia Ray's family was there. Keilani Jones's family was there. The families of Makia and Isaiah, Keiosha's own children, were there too. They weren't just grieving the loss of the little girls. They were grieving the betrayal of a mother who should have protected them. Judge Kellow delivered the sentence. Life in prison on all 5 counts of manslaughter. 1 for each victim. Tamia Ray, Kehlani Jones, Makia Chapman, Isaiah Jones, and the unborn baby. Keiosha also received 1 year in jail for the DUI conviction. 4 of the life sentences would run concurrently. That means at the same time. But the 5th life sentence would run consecutively. That means after the others. In practical terms, this meant Keiosha would have to serve a minimum of 40 years in prison before she would even be eligible for parole. At her current age, that effectively meant she would spend the rest of her life behind bars. Judge Kellow explained his reasoning. He said that listening to the recorded jail call where Keiosha talked about smoking marijuana had made him angry. He said that if losing her own children was not enough to make her change her behavior, then she would continue to be a danger to society. The message was clear. Keiosha Rucker had been given every chance to take responsibility, to show remorse, to demonstrate that she understood the gravity of what she had done. But she had failed at every turn. And now, she would pay the price. As Keiosha was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, the families of the victims wept. Some felt that justice had been served. Others felt that no sentence could ever bring back the people they had lost. But everyone agreed on one thing. Keiosha Rucker would never get behind the wheel of a car again. But the story doesn't end with the criminal conviction. In a move that shocked observers across the country, Keiosha Rucker filed a civil lawsuit against the city of Tulsa and the Tulsa Fire Department. The lawsuit alleges that the fire truck driver was reckless, that he was traveling at an excessive and unsafe speed of 61 to 67 miles per hour, that he moved into oncoming traffic to pass her vehicle and created a dangerous situation. Keiosha's attorney argues that she believed she had reasonable time to complete her left turn, that the fire truck's speed made it impossible for her to do so safely. The public reaction was immediate and furious. A woman who killed 5 people while driving, impaired and without a license, was now blaming the first responders. The same first responders who were rushing to save lives at a building fire. The same firefighters who were doing their jobs exactly as they were trained to do. How could she seek damages after causing such devastation? It wasn't just Keiosha filing a lawsuit. Another survivor from the crash, one of the adult passengers who lived through the collision, also filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the city of Tulsa and the Tulsa Fire Department. Legal experts weighed in on the cases. They pointed out that emergency vehicles are given considerable leeway during emergency responses. Proving that a firefighter was reckless while responding to a fire with lights and sirens activated is extremely difficult. And Keiosha's criminal conviction, combined with the evidence of cocaine and marijuana in her system, would make it nearly impossible for her to win a civil case. The city of Tulsa declined to comment publicly, citing the pending litigation. But city attorneys are expected to vigorously defend against the claims. As of early 2026, these civil cases are still pending. Before we go any further, we need to talk about the 5 people who lost their lives that night. Because they weren't just names in a court document. They were real people with families who loved them. Tamia Ray was 23 years old. She had her whole life ahead of her. Dreams she wanted to chase, goals she wanted to achieve. Her family is left to wonder what she could have become, what she could have accomplished. All of that was stolen in 3 seconds. Kehlani Jones was 5 years old. She was just beginning to experience the world. Kindergarten age, full of curiosity and wonder. She trusted the adults around her to keep her safe. That trust was broken in the worst way possible. Makia Chapman was 4 years old. She was Keiosha's daughter. She called Keiosha Mommy. She trusted her mother with her life. Every child believes their parent will protect them. Makia believed that too. And she was wrong. Isaiah Jones was 1 year old. She was Keiosha's youngest child, a baby who depended entirely on her mother's protection. She never got to experience childhood, never got to go to school, never got to make friends, never got to grow up. And then there was the unborn baby, a child who never took a first breath. Parents who had dreams of holding their baby for the first time. Dreams of watching their child grow. All of that was shattered before it even began. A life stolen before it could begin. The families of these victims are left to grieve. They wake up every day knowing that their loved ones are gone, that they will never see them again, never hear their voices, never hold them. The Tulsa community was traumatized by this tragedy. 5 lives lost in one crash, 3 of them children. It's the kind of thing that shakes a city to its core. These were lives that mattered, not just numbers, not just victims in a case file. Real people who were loved and who will be missed every single day. This case raises an impossible question, and I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think justice was served with the life sentence? Or should the fire truck's speed be investigated further? Comment below and let me know what you think. But please keep it respectful. These are real families dealing with real grief. If this video made you think about the consequences of impaired driving, please share it. It might save a life. Someone you know might be making the same dangerous choices that Keiosha made, and sharing this story could be the wake-up call they need. And don't forget to subscribe for more cases that challenge our understanding of justice and accountability. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Now let's talk about what this case really means. This case is complex, but not in the way most true crime cases are. There's no mystery about what happened. We know who was responsible. We know Keiosha had cocaine and marijuana in her system. We know she failed to yield to the fire truck. The question isn't who did it. The question is, how do we respond? Some people argue that Keiosha has suffered enough. She lost her own children. She's permanently disabled. She's living with grief that most people can't comprehend. Isn't that punishment enough? Others argue that accountability has to mean something. Keiosha got behind the wheel while impaired. She had no valid license. She had 6 people in her car, including 3 small children. That's a fundamental betrayal of responsibility. The consequences have to be severe. Then there's the role of addiction. Substance abuse doesn't excuse what Keiosha did, but it does help us understand how the tragedy happened. Addiction is a disease, but driving impaired is a choice. Where is the line between illness and criminal responsibility? And what about the fire truck's speed? 61 to 67 miles per hour during an emergency response. Oklahoma law allows emergency vehicles to exceed speed limits, but it also requires due regard for the safety of others. Was the speed excessive, or was it necessary to get to the fire quickly? Multiple witnesses testified that all other traffic yielded. Does Keiosha's lawsuit have any merit? Finally, think about the impact on the first responders. The firefighters were racing to save lives at a building fire. They ended up involved in a crash that killed 5 people. That's trauma they'll carry forever. They continue to serve the Tulsa community despite that burden. And now they're facing a lawsuit from the person who caused the crash. So what can we learn from this tragedy? First, impaired driving kills. Keiosha tested positive for cocaine and THC. Any substance impairs your judgment and reaction time. Never drive under the influence. No exceptions. Use rideshares. Call a designated driver. Take public transit. Apps like Uber and Lyft can save lives. Parents, model this behavior for your children. Second, driving with children is a sacred responsibility. When children are in your car, the stakes are infinitely higher. They trust you to protect them. They can't make decisions for themselves. Every choice you make behind the wheel affects their lives. If you wouldn't do it alone, don't do it with kids in the car. Third, valid licensing matters. Driving without a license often signals bigger problems. Lapsed insurance, unpaid tickets. Take responsibility and maintain a valid license. Fourth, always yield to emergency vehicles. When you see lights and sirens, pull over safely to the right side of the road. Stop if necessary. Don't panic. Emergency responders are trying to save lives. Your cooperation can mean the difference between life and death. Finally, if you see someone about to drive impaired, intervene. Take their keys. Call them a ride. An uncomfortable conversation is better than a funeral, especially when children are involved. Keiosha Rucker will spend the rest of her life in prison. She'll live every day knowing that her decisions killed 5 people, including her own daughters. She'll live with her physical disabilities, with the memories, with the weight of all those losses. Whether that constitutes justice is something each of us must decide for ourselves. The civil lawsuits continue, another chapter in this ongoing tragedy. The Tulsa Fire Department continues serving the community. Those firefighters show up every day despite the trauma they carry. And we're left with the ultimate question. When a mother's choices kill her own children, where does tragedy end and accountability begin? This case has no easy answers, only grief, loss, and hard questions about responsibility. 5 lives are gone. Tamia, Keilani, Makia, Isaiah, and an unborn baby. Remember them not as numbers, but as people who were loved, people who had dreams, people who mattered. Thank you for watching this difficult case with me. What are your thoughts? Do you think the life sentence was appropriate? Does the civil lawsuit change your perspective? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one, and I want to hear what you think about this case. If this video impacted you, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Someone who might be making dangerous choices behind the wheel. This story could be the wake-up call that saves a life. Subscribe for more cases that make us question justice, accountability, and human nature. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. And remember this, every time you get behind the wheel, you hold lives in your hands. Drive sober. Drive safe. Drive like someone's child is in every car around you. Because they are. I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe out there.